Eureka's really far north. It's the really far tip of California. Yeah.
As far north as you get, yeah. So, tech news, here we go. First up, FTX plans to recoup, that means take back, political donations by Sam Bankman Fried and his associates, estimated to be a little over $70 million to help repay creditors. So I can hear some politicians screaming bloody murder. And are we to assume that most of those screams are coming from Democrats? And some Republicans, have made the point. There were some very close races in these midterm elections, and to what degree, if this 70 million was disproportionately spent on Democrats, which it appears to be by some accounts, might it have actually tipped you know uh, played a significant role in determining the number of seats in the House and whatnot. So now that money's going to come back. Anyway, that's going to be weird. Next, Washington Post says they have sources that Sam Bankman-Fried agrees voluntarily to be extradited to the U.S., where he faces criminal and civil charges like conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. Right. Well,
Tyler,
yes.
did you see some of the tweets that I sent out about that I put out the other day about this whole sort of situation? Especially, why isn't anyone talking about his parents?
Okay,
Like,
hold that
why
thought,
isn't
because
anyone going down that road?
didn't some tech bro come in here and say on a couple of occasions that the Bahama prison is one of the worst in the world.
Yeah, I don't. It was probably for sure.
I recall at least twice. So that might have something to do with this.
Yeah, but
Because
the tweet about it, as well as the fact that, I mean, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and I feel like, yes, he's coming across because the Bahamian prison system is not the best to be in, but why aren't his parents being more accountable? Why aren't they holding his parents more accountable in all that they're doing in this process against SBF himself?
Well, I'm going to tell you, why. Okay,
Libel.
Go ahead, Ken.
here's what I think happened. I think the evidence against them is probably less direct, so they haven't done an indictment yet.
Ken, I
Particularly on.
need to tag you in that tweet because they're looking at the father for sure
I
because
know, they are okay, but here's the thing. So, and and I'm not saying he won't get indicted, okay, but my expectation, just to make this short, is that they're going to pressure SBF into copping a plea in exchange for going easy on the parents. Okay, that's what's probably going to happen. So they're going to use that as leverage to get him to plead, so they don't even have to bother with a trial. Okay, that's probably the way that's going to go down.
But regardless, I think that people are a little bit not wanting to publish anything or put anything out in the public light because if nothing's been confirmed legally, they don't want to be responsible for
No, no, but
libel.
there has been, as part of the congressional hearings. I mean, there was the guy who's running it now, the guy who the court appointed. There was money paid to the father. Okay, whether it was for legal services or whatever, money went out to the father. There may have been homes bought. They're probably still doing an inventory of it. Um, this is where it is. But he obviously wasn't the CEO, so that doesn't mean it's not coming. I mean, just because these things don't happen like, let's get SBF on Monday and let's indict the parents on Wednesday. It's not, the process doesn't work like that. That doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay, and they're probably dangling it over. They're probably dangling it over his head in the hopes of getting a plea. Just remember, he only just agreed to waive extradition the other day, so they'll get him to New York. You know, they'll pressure him. Obviously we're also in the holidays, so they'll pressure him. In the next couple of weeks, and they'll probably get him he'll agree to a plea deal, you know, in order to go easy on his parents. You know, they'll say, you're young, you know, you can afford to serve, and they're older, and, you know, do you want them dying in prison? And I mean, because they probably want to avoid a trial if they can. It's complicated. So, and then of course they probably want him to testify about anybody else in the crypto world and whatever he knows. And one of the reasons they moved so quickly against him, when his girlfriend showed up in New York last week or the week before, I knew she wasn't there to visit the Statue of Liberty. Okay, she went. No,
That
no,
was
no.
great.
Yeah, she went there to go talk to the U.S. attorney in the Southern District and basically throw him under a bus, because if you listen to that call, particularly he did on Twitter Spaces, he threw her under the bus. She probably heard that one, said, let me, turn on him before he turns on me. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Next, a look at Modulo Capital, a mysterious multi-strategy hedge fund founded this year and based in Albany, in the Bahamas, which received $400 million from Alameda Research. Operated out of the same luxurious Bahamian condominium community where Sam Bankman-Fried and other FTX employees lived. So, what is Modulo Capital, the receiver of $400 million from Alameda, which happened to be in the same building? Next up, Twitter launches Blue for Business with select businesses, helping companies identify employees via an additional badge, but doesn't share other perks and pricing. So the idea is the company pays to be able to tag all of its employees as official team members.
Tyler, I feel like Elon Musk is having a fire sale with all these badge things that he's doing.
Well, I think a bunch. It'd be curious to see what would compel companies to tag uh, their team members via Twitter, so
Tyler, what
that,
about keeping them accountable for what they say?
yeah, in part for sure, it might be worth it just for that. Yes, but would you? I'm trying to think of what would be the ideal scenario here as a business owner if you have a bunch of team members on Twitter. Here's a quote from the article: by creating this connection, we're making it possible for businesses to create networks within their organizations on Twitter. Businesses can affiliate their leadership, brands, support handles, employees or teams, journalists. That's one sentence, new sentence. Journalists, sports team players, or movie characters can all be affiliated. So journalists could be affiliated with the publication, sports team players with the team. Okay. While identifying associated brands and employees as a good feature for companies, they would want many more benefits out of this plan. Okay. Next up, 97-year. Oh yeah, we covered the Nazi story. Where did the tech news
You
go? Here it is. Sorry.
covered the Twitter poll. Oh,
That's in one of the top stories, so it's probably coming
done.
up here.
Okay.
Yeah, one more before that one. It says from Bloomberg, replying to a tweet suggesting voting on Twitter policy decisions should be restricted to blue subscribers. Oh, wait a minute. Didn't the tech bro tell us 24 hours ago that was going to happen next?
I
Cheryl?
told you he have
Yes.
insider stories, right, Tyler? I told
Uh-oh.
you.
Somebody knows something. Um,
Yay.
Elon Musk said Twitter will make that change. Whoa. Holy smokes. So somebody on Twitter suggested that voting on Twitter policy polls should be restricted to Twitter Blue subscribers, and Elon Musk replied after we met yesterday that Twitter will make that change. Interesting. How did that tech bro know that?
Who is that
Anyway,
somebody? Who is
who
that
was
somebody?
that?
Isn't it Tyler?
Who the hell was that? Can somebody
They
find
must have.
out?
They must have been.
Can somebody look back at
They,
yesterday's show and find out who that tech bro
yeah.
was?
Yeah, I think
So,
somebody must have been listening in and then just tweeted, and then Elon responded to him. I think.
so next up is the one that I think Aaron was talking about. Elon Musk's poll asking, "Should I step down as head of Twitter?" ends with 57.5% voting yes after Musk said Twitter polls will determine major policy change. Now,
Well spoken.
I can share something else about that
And
poll.
me too. I want to share something else too about that poll.
You go first, Aaron.
Okay, first of all, it's a resounding yes from everyone. Second, Lex Friedman volunteered to be the CEO of Twitter, trying to bring back. Third, I saw another tweet by what's his name, Snoop Dogg, resounding 98% or something, to be the CEO. But that's not the problem. I think in my mind, and according to a couple of discussions I had, Elon Musk is trying to bankrupt Twitter.
Okay, I got I got a little something, a little extra spice to add to this one. If if one of your main objectives as head of Twitter would be to remove all the bots, right? And indeed, there was kind of articles in the past few days, 5, 6, 7, 8 days ago, that Twitter implemented new changes to try and minimize bots, right? And oh, by the way, the blue checks is, you could almost say, primarily aimed around precisely that endeavor as well. So, kind of two anecdotal evidences that line up that indicate that minimizing bots is a real priority. Now, if that's the case, right, that a very, very, very top priority is minimizing bots. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. Now, if that's one of your main focuses or the main focus, wouldn't you try to get the bots to all self identify in some way? And what could you do to get the bots? What kind of a bot bait could you make that would get the bots and the makers of the bots, the controllers of the bots, to use their bots? So think of that when you think of that poll, because here's another way to think of it. That poll of should I step down, the people who voted yes, right? There's a certain number of people who voted yes. That group of people, or voters, let's call them, is an incredibly small fraction of the total 250-ish million Twitter accounts, right? And there's now an interesting data point about those people. First of all, they're probably last in line to get to Mars. So I don't know what their backup plan is when the apocalypse happens. But maybe there's an,
Sorry,
maybe there's
I
an,
voted yes, so okay, I'm not going to Mars.
maybe there's another potential data point that can be extracted from people voting yes in that poll. So maybe they self-identified in some way that might be useful to Twitter for the purpose of minimizing bots, potentially.
So Ken's concern of not voting was valid then.
Anywho, we'll see. Maybe something will shake out around that. I don't know. Maybe 24 hours from now, maybe some tech bro will come in here and tell us what's what with that. But anyway, the next is, as
Hi
U.S.
there.
lawmakers. Yes.
I was going to add one comment. I actually think so. So I think that this is just Elon generating engagement. Yeah, just keeping up the engagement numbers. So he can in the future say, oh look, Twitter is still has high engagement, growing. He'll do these sort of stunts now and then just to keep up engagement while he's raising money from the Qataris or others to fill the hole that he has right now. That's my theory.
Okay.
And he did show up at the World Cup with Kirshner, so stuff's going on.
See,
amongst others.
that's why I was speculating that he's trying to bankrupt Twitter because who is the best person to learn it from? Trump companies.
Next up, Wall Street Journal. As U.S. lawmakers considered adding antitrust bills to the omnibus spending package, tech trade group CCIA, Meta, Amazon, and others ramped opposition to them, meaning opposition to those antitrust bills, or not to the U.S. lawmakers. The industry has spent more than $100 million to fight antitrust measures and other bills in Congress, and this is just an unfortunate reality that the big companies in America, in some ways, are stronger than the government, or that the government is just a bunch of greedy fuckers, and it's a pay to play system, and that's truly regrettable. And that's why you've got regulation clamping down on big tech in the EU and not in the US. Because the companies can pay to delay and influence and whatever, and that's just how the sausage gets made. Okay, next up,
Yeah, but Tyler,
Amazon.
they're probably talking about. Haven't read the article. I think they're probably talking about having it not tacked on to this must-pass spending bill that has to pass this week, just to keep the government open. Okay, so I mean, there is generally an attempt to keep too many non-germane things from that
Right.
spending bill. Okay, however, part of that spending bill probably will pass with an amendment that includes banning TikTok on the phones of government employees. That probably is going to be in that bill.
Amazon agrees to settle two EU antitrust cases related to third party sellers on its platform, and it won't pay a fine and will adhere to commitments for 7 years. They've agreed to settle the two European Union antitrust cases related to allegations about its treatment of third party sellers. Next, TikTok begins telling users why a video was recommended in the For You feed, such as previous interactions or followed accounts. They're launching a new feature that allows users to see why a particular video was recommended to them in their feed, the company announced Tuesday. There you go. Next up, more than 100 Bitcoin claimed to be inaccessible was moved out of cold wallets tied to an exchange that went bankrupt in 2019 after the CEO allegedly died. Amay?
Yeah, sorry.
Shady, shady, shady. That's all I could say. There's a
Yeah,
lot
this
of
is.
shady stuff going on.
That's
Hi,
the
May,
ghost.
Donna here. Yeah,
Hey,
that
Hey,
is
Don.
Donna.
that's the Quadrigex Canadian exchange where there was total scam, shady. Guy was a scamster for decades, and he quote died maybe in
Even after,
India.
Wait, Donna,
even
did they find the money? Did someone try to get the money?
you
Well,
know
we
you're
don't know
shady
who.
when you're still doing shit in the afterlife.
Wait a
Yeah,
second. Wait, Donna,
exactly,
did
exactly,
is
exactly.
someone trying to get money out of those wallets all of a sudden? Question to Donna.
They've moved. We've seen some of the Bitcoin move, and obviously we don't know who has the keys. Maybe the guy has been reincarnated in India. You know that happens often. So we'll have to wait and see, and maybe somebody like Chainalysis, Elliptic, or others will be on the case here.
That's pretty
Is
cool to
this
follow, though, for sure. That would be
is
interesting to
this a
follow.
guy that appears on one of the Netflix documentary who is supposed to like be engaged to someone and suddenly disappeared in India or something?
Yeah, there. No, that's
Yeah, he
Shant.
died in India.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got
Oh, okay.
married. Yeah, they got married a few weeks before he mysteriously
Yes.
died going there for, he allegedly had a very, very serious stomach ailment, which, I mean,
Ah, yes, yes, yes. I
it's
saw.
not generally not the place one goes if they're in the midst of a stomach ailment. And he
Mm.
died in a hospital that has had before some, you know, iffy death certificates.
Yeah,
Let's
I
just
think
put it
there is
that
a
way.
Netflix documentary on this one.
Okay.
That's
Thank
Donna.
you.
Where
That's really fascinating, and Tyler, this is really interesting. There is a book that I read called Shantaranam, which has basically been made into an Apple TV movie. And what Donna just said is completely validated by the actual story of the book Shantaram, because it was about a prisoner from Australia who escaped, and he went to Bombay, and the whole book is about what he experienced and how his life was escaping prison and being in Bombay. And what Donna just said is 100% accurate, because once you leave the pretense of any westernized world, once you enter to Mumbai or Delhi or anywhere in India, it's just very, very different. And you may get certificates or some documentation, but it also has a price on it as well. So, to Donna's point, which has me quite curious, is if this is moving, is it being moved because of that person, that said person, or did that person, when they arrived in Bombay, had to, or in India, wherever they went, did they have to did they have to wash hands in order to stay in India and not be found or not be given into the authorities? That's something that's very interesting. I'm curious to follow this one for sure.
Well, we didn't know that he needed to be given to authorities till after he was quote dead, and that then they uncovered that the whole thing was a scam, and he'd been not, he'd been trading and using customer money. Sound familiar? In ways it shouldn't be used. And then they looked at and saw that the co-founder, I don't remember what his name was, had also been in some other scams 10 years before, etc. And lo and behold, the guy in India was the only one with the keys. And who knows? Ernst and Young, I believe, was the bankruptcy trustee accounting firm for sure, and they found a lot of shady things going on.
And EY also, EY and Deloitte were the ones, and Tyler confirmed this because I think you mentioned this the other day. Didn't EY and Deloitte say they were not going to do any sort of audits of crypto exchanges? Did they say that, Tyler? I think you mentioned that yesterday.
I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't know about those ones, but I know that the one who was doing a smaller firm that was doing, I believe it was Binance, said that they wouldn't be doing them anymore, or
Yeah, I think
the
I think that
attestations, not necessarily the auditing. I'm
yeah, I
not sure.
think that the big four have moved away from it, but these are like the stuff here. EY basically signed on to before that those decisions. This was a more recent thing. I think they've all decided, to keep their distance from crypto. Even though Deloitte is I think the auditor for Coinbase. Though.
I mean, they're definitely all involved. Not all. PwC, I believe, is involved in the FTX, working with the estate. That's as we know, a very lucrative business. The other business of accounting, though it may be lucrative, those firms are, as we saw with Enron, the deep pockets. Enron went out. Arthur Anderson went out of business around Enron, also because of the way their firm was structured. So yeah, that's a risky business because you've got deep pockets and insurance.
Where did he go to potentially get a death certificate?
No, potentially he died in India. He went to India, had a problem with his stomach, which he had a disease of, and died. Even in the bankruptcy, a lot of the customers wanted to exhume the body in order to prove that he was really dead, because maybe even now, as we see, he might not be dead.
Donna, I'm going to put the bet that he's probably managed to After everything going on, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not dead.
So Donna, just as a point of history, Arthur Anderson went under in regards to Enron not because they had deep pockets. It was because they were criminally indicted, and nobody else, the major firms that typically would use them, didn't want to do business with a firm that was under criminal indictment. Which is one of the reasons since then the government's been reluctant to bring indictments against corporations, because you kill off major corporations, even though there may have only been a handful of individuals that were actually, involved in the actual case. So, but the real culprit there was the criminal indictment, not because they got hit with a judgment.
All right, moving along. The DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Agency in the U.S., finds a Mexico-based meth and coke gang operating across the U.S., Mexico, Europe, and Australia used Binance to launder $15 to $40 million.
Shocking.
Is this first we're hearing about criminals using cryptocurrency?
It used to be the only thing you heard about it, and that all went away, and strangely, it's coming back. Why is it coming back now?
I think
I'm not
people
sure it
want
ever
more.
went away.
I think people want to have more movie rights, if you ask me.
There's also some rumors and leaks around potential DOJ stuff in Binance, rumors that SBF might say X or little Caroline might say Y, but and also there was this chat that the bizarrely the CEOs of some of these exchanges were on, which was of course not private because nothing's private.
Okay.
I think it's
Mastodon.
because of oh, I think it's because of the problems that people are dying from drug use. Like again, very high. The numbers are very high, and people are complaining. Why is the government not doing anything? So they crack down on more accounts like this, maybe.
Okay. Mastodon CEO says they've reached 2.5 million monthly active users, up from 300,000 in October. There you go. So we assume those are Twitter users who now have signed up for Mastodon. Apple fixes a Mac OS vulnerability reported by Microsoft that lets attackers bypass Apple Gatekeeper, which was a feature that checks if apps are notarized and developer signed. Nikkei Japan says they have sources that in a first, Apple plans to move some MacBook production to Vietnam next year, asking Foxconn to begin as early as May to further diversify from China. iPhone maker Apple aims to have out of China production alternatives for key products. Why? They're clearly in a hurry. This is another day, another article. These articles are happening on more than a weekly basis. Let's say every third day, we see new headlines of Apple diversifying out of China. What's the rush? I have my answer, but is there any other plausible reason that they've been doing business there for so long, so successfully, so entrenched, so deeply ingrained, and now they just want to jump out the fucking window overnight? That's got to be expensive. It's got to be take a lot of people don't like to make changes that big that quickly. That goes against human nature in every way. What's the rush? And they seem to be going to multiple places, namely India, Thailand, and Vietnam. So it's not that they fell in love with one place. It's not that we love Vietnam now, so we're going to Vietnam. No, They had so much business invested there that they need to go into multiple countries to diversify, which again adds
Was it?
more headaches to this unraveling. So why go through all of this?
Is it because if they don't move, they can't get the chips to assemble in China anyway? They have to assemble somewhere else because of the, well, US doesn't allow chips to be supplied to China, right? So if there's no chips, how are they going to assemble their machine? I mean, the devices.
Okay, a drop in VC deals and a slow IPO market are pushing tech startups into debt-based financing options. Something called Preqin shows new VC deals fell 42% year over year to 286 billion from January to November. And now I'm really kicking myself for not investing in my buddy's debt-based startup financing company. New York
But
Times, an
but Tyler,
analysis.
how do you do that? Because most startups don't have any cash flow. So how are they
Yeah,
even credit worthy? So probably
yeah.
when they say debt, I'm just going to take a wild guess here. When they're talking about debt based, they're talking about what I would call very soft notes, like payment in kind notes, that are, super high risk to own, have tremendous tax consequences, by the way, to them. I just don't really understand how you could replace VC money with debt. I mean, just the nature of the companies that you're financing, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you could do like zero coupon debt, which basically means that, I mean, technically you're borrowing money, but you owe it 10 years down the road. But you just generally don't see that like in VC firms. I mean, this thing sounds like extremely risky for the lenders, by the way. I mean, given
So
the nature of young companies.
yeah, so Ken, I agree with you, except one category of startups that's obviously exploded over the last decade or so or more is SaaS, right? Software as a service, annual recurring revenue. If companies are they're able to borrow off they do have revenue. They're not necessarily willing to take a valuation cut in this market, but they do have revenue. Of course, it's questionable whether they can sustain. We saw Salesforce and others companies have had higher churn, and people are going to generally be cutting back on buying lots of software subscriptions, just like any subscription business. But yeah, but it's still revenue, and you can borrow against that if you have high confidence and you have the
Oh,
metrics
that
to prove
that's
it.
true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. My buddies who made ARK Capital, spelled ARK, and Capital with a K, out of Stockholm. It's AI based analysis of all your data. You connect your pipes, your data pipes, to ARK Capital, and it uses its AI to project your, offer you a debt based finance program based on your actual data of sorts. So anyway, like your email, that you even send in your email, and it can track your sales team's open rate, and then you send in your Salesforce, and it can accurately get the data around what percentage of your phone calls lead to pilots, and which of those pilots lead to all of this. So they get deep into the analytics of your business, and based on that, can come up with very tailored debt based offerings or solutions. So, New York Times, an analysis shows how Chinese language bots on Twitter drowned out tweets about protests over China's zero COVID-19 policy as people sought to evade censors. So, Elon Musk has recently vowed to crack down on bots, but the flood of spam for Chinese users is overwhelming, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Forbes, a profile of London-based crypto trading firm winner Mute. Who cares? Next, Better Health, which is a startup, Cerebral, also a startup, and other digital mental health companies are failing to offer quality care due to unprofessional therapists, a pressure to grow, and more. Okay, yeah, it's a difficult space. 9% of Netflix's signups in the US in November were for its ad based discounted model. 57% of subscribers to that plan were rejoining or new signups, while 43% were people who downgraded from the full paid version. Google settles a lawsuit with an ex-employee who said that the Fellowship of Friends sect dominated a Google unit. Longtime sect member Peter Lubbers leaves Google. What the hell is Fellowship of Friends?
Cult.
The entrance. It's a cult. Okay. How do I join?
You have to talk to one of the robots from yesterday.
Okay, maybe it's a. Let me ask ChatGPT.
There you go.
Um, by the way, ChatGPT does have a very kind of cult-like. I would even say Scientology-like delivery, kind of tonality. If you notice, um, the suit. What is this? They said the suit that he been fired after complaining that the Fellowship of Friends, a religious organization based in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, dominated a business unit inside of Google called the Google Developer Studios, which makes videos showcasing the company's technology. So the video editors, we gotcha. The video editors at Google have their own cult. This is good. This is my kind of story. The suit claims that the leader of the business unit, Peter Lubbers, a longtime member of the Fellowship of Friends, hired many of the religious group's members onto the team. Oh, that's how you did it. As contractors, helped some advance to full-time positions, and gave work to many others when staffing company conferences and parties. Google confirmed on Monday that the suit had been resolved. It also confirmed that Mr. Lubbers was no longer employed by Google, though it declined to explain his departure. Mr. Lubbers could not immediately be reached for comment. Founded by a former school teacher named Robert Earl Burton in 1970, the Fellowship of Friends describes itself as, quote unquote, available to anyone interested in pursuing the spiritual work of awakening. It claims about 1,500 members around the world, including roughly 500 in and around Oregon House, California, a tiny town about 180 miles north of Google's Silicon Valley headquarters. Mr. Burton believed people could achieve a higher consciousness by embracing the fine arts. Sign me up. Over the decades, he cultivated an extravagant lifestyle with help from his followers, who often donated 10% of their monthly earnings to the organization, as you do. In 1984, a former member filed a lawsuit claiming that young men who joined the organization, quote, had been forcefully and unlawfully sexually seduced by Burton. Who could have seen that coming? No pun intended. In 1996, another former member accused Mr. Burton of sexual misconduct with him when he was a minor. Now we're really shocked. Both suits were settled out of court. Okay, so there we have it.
Have you considered starting a cult, Tyler? I think you'd get quite a following.
Fellowship of Friends with Benefits is my cult.
I thought it was tech news around the world with
Tech,
friends.
tech, tech news, friends,
I bet you're
friendly
some
tech,
tech bro,
tech
future
bro,
predictor.
tech bros around the world.
Tech news is around the world.
Only bros, Tyler?
Oh, you can be a bro.
Okay.
You can identify as a tech bro.
Okay.
There ain't no shame in that. So, I'm trying to normalize tech broness, if you haven't noticed.
Tech Pauls.
So, Amazon quietly launches Prime Gaming in India weeks after testing the service. offering Prime and video subscribers access to mobile, whatever. Financial Times says they have sources that DCG is attempting to raise capital to avoid bankruptcy for its Genesis subsidiary. Oh boy. Remote work and tech layoffs hollow out San Francisco, where only 43% of workers are back at offices compared to 46% in LA, 47% in New York, and Austin 60, call it 63%. So in Austin, they're back at the office. Well, yeah, because you got free air conditioning. Where in LA, they're at the beach, and in San Francisco, they can't be bothered. And remote work and tech layoffs hollow out San Francisco. Yeah, because half the people are gone out of the office, and the other half got laid off. Yeah, San Francisco's getting hollowed out. Okay, next, South China Morning Post. It says Xiaomi begins laying off 15% of its 35,000 employees. Amazon rolls out Matter smart home standard over Wi-Fi to Echo devices of all types. And
Oh, by the way, Tyler, in regards to the San Francisco story, the city itself is facing a $750 million budget deficit, because of the
let
fact
me
that
guess,
because no,
short, no taxes.
no, because nobody's in the offices, and so they're, nobody's there spending money because the city's been hollowed out, so they've got a big budget gap now.
And
Is
it's
it not
not
because of
only
the
San
daylight
Francisco.
robbery?
Sorry,
That
Carl.
too. That too.
Nobody's back in Bellevue.
Okay,
Nobody's back in Kirkland. Nobody's back in the San Jose high tech area, with the exception of
I'll tell
Mountain
you
View.
this. I will tell you this. The islands of Thailand are booming.
And you mentioned
People
that.
are moving here. I see it every day. I've never seen anything like it. Well, Sihanoukville in Cambodia, perhaps, but people are moving to incredibly cost efficient, uh, high standard of living, peaceful, food generating, water pouring from the sky, beautiful tropical paradises at rock bottom prices.
So, what's the profile of the people that are making it their destination? Where are they coming from, largely?
What I'm noticing, it's a bunch of Americans and Europeans is what I'm noticing, and a bit of Russians.
How are they going to make money?
On the line.
Work remote.
Digital nomad.
Okay. Next up, Twitter says WC 2022 for the FIFA World Cup. Oh, that's World Cup 2022. So Twitter says World Cup 2022 generated 140. I'm sorry, 147 billion impressions, surpassing the last World Cup in 2018 and more than doubling the impressions of the 2020 Olympics, Tokyo 2020 Olympics. Hold on a second. Didn't we? Weren't we here during the Tokyo Olympics? Didn't we have tech news during the Tokyo Olympics? We did. We were here.
I think so.
Yes.
That
2021
means we've been doing
actually.
this more than 2 years now.
It was pushed a year,
No,
wasn't it?
2021. It was postponed,
Yeah,
remember?
yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Found.
That's right. Thank you.
It
I
was
was losing my mind.
postponed,
I'm like, we
right?
haven't been doing this 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, it's 2 years alternating. So they do the
Wow.
Olympics and then in 2 years they do the World Cup. They always do that.
But that's funny. Is the headline or the news about the tweets during the 2020 Olympics when there was none? So maybe maybe,
Uh,
maybe so. I won't. I won't. Anyway, sorry.
so Tumblr adds live streaming. Imagine AI, which uses AI to help photographers edit photos and automate post-production, raises 30 million. Bloomberg has done an analysis of Elon Musk's reported attempts to raise money for Twitter via an equity sale at an absurd price, why his successor will be unpopular, and more. And Binance US plans to acquire Voyage Digital. Who cares? Okay, so those are your big boring tech stories, and now we go to the tweets. Did anybody have a tweet since we met last time? Or did anyone see a tweet they thought was interesting? Anything you liked, any tech stories you think should have been one of the big tech stories, or that you would like to share with the class today?
Hey Tyler, there was two of them I was going to send to you. One was about the Roomba iRobots. I don't know. That was an interesting one. And then also how they're hacking Ring cameras and live streaming while they SWAT you.
Wait. One more time, please.
There's one on
This.
security issues with the Roomba where it was
Okay.
taking naked photos of a lady on the toilet.
Okay.
And
What?
then, yeah,
Roomba taking pictures?
yes. And then the other one
Well, that's,
was
that's just a setting. You got to turn off the toilet cam in the settings. But go
But
ahead.
this is this is your daily reminder to have some awareness of the traffic that flies around and out of your home network.
So if you tape the camera on Roomba, would it be still able to navigate through the house?
No,
Don't forget, she signed up to have that taken, just so you know. She was a tester. They take those images and they use them to
Could
get to
somehow
label.
do a deal with OnlyFans, it's a win-win, ostensibly.
Roomba
but the thing
only.
is, it's only a software switch away, regardless.
Hold
If
on.
you've got
Hold
a
on while I
yeah,
hold on while I go to Pornhub and search for Roomba real quick. So,
Your employer is
um,
watching you, Tyler.
hashtag Roomba porn. It's a whole new
MENA,
category.
MENA software
What was
upgrade.
the second story, Tom?
So on Krebs on Security, he had one about them hacking Ring cameras and
Rain
from
camera. What are ring?
the Ring camera
Oh, ring,
doorbells.
it's
ring cameras.
like
Right,
a
Ring
Nest.
camera
This is the
doorbells.
same issue. This is again having a device in your house that's connected to the internet and not knowing what data's coming from it. The
But there
solutions
were
are there are
Ben,
solutions and they're not too difficult.
but they were live streaming you getting swatted.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they can do whatever they. If you've got a camera in your house and it's connected to the internet, it can stream video unless you make sure that it can't. And if you buy something that's architecture requires it to stream video to the internet to work, like a Ring or a Nest, then you are putting yourself in a situation. I've got a bunch of Nests, by the way. It's not as if I'm preaching here, but you just want to be aware that you're putting yourself in a situation where it's fundamentally possible for other people like you to watch videos of your house. And the same goes for robotic vacuums or anything else that has cameras, microphones, or any other sensor in it. Unless it's on a separate VLAN within your home network that you control the traffic of, the egress of the traffic, then it's open to whoever wants to throw the software switch to see the video. So,
So if you turn
What?
off the Ring camera, like the video recording, would that
well, if
work?
you throw, yeah, no. I mean, so it's something like a Ring and a Nest. You can't prevent this because they fundamentally require a web connection to do what they do. I believe Ring has a local element coming, or here in the newest versions. But if you buy something that needs to stream its data to the web to work, like a webcam or a Nest Cam or whatever, then you can't expect to have privacy because it's only a software switch away or a hack away from somebody intercepting that data and looking at it, whether it be a law
So
enforcement or whoever.
Sorry, both
can we go back to
Ring,
what?
Ring and
Hold on.
Roomba belongs to Amazon, right, Tyler?
I know Ring does. Yeah.
Roomba too, right? They kind of acquired it. Remember, we're
Okay.
talking
But
about the
what? Tom, what was the Krebs article about Ring again?
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you. I'll DM it to you because the Krebs one was interesting because of the Ring camera, and don't forget, iRobot was also bought by Amazon as well.
My inbox is burning here. I'm waiting for this story. I don't even want to move on yet. I want to
I
see what
know.
this
Hold
is.
on one second. I'll send you the Krebs one first. We got to Twitter.
Krebs ring. Hold on, here we go. Krebs ring. Let's see what they got in the news.
Look, my boss is here.
Here, I got it right here. Hacked ring cameras used to record swatting victims. Hold on. But I have the article. It says 2 U.S. men have been charged with hacking into the Ring home security cameras of a dozen random people and then swatting them. What does swatting mean? Falsely reporting a violent incident at the target's address to trick local police into responding with force. Prosecutors say the duo used the compromised Ring devices to stream live video footage on social media of police raiding their targets' homes and to taunt authorities when they arrive. Prosecutors in LA alleged 20-year-old James Thomas Andrew McCarty, aka Aspartame, and some other knucklehead of Wisconsin, conspired to hack into Yahoo email accounts belonging to the victims in the United States. From there, the two allegedly would check how many of those Yahoo accounts were associated with Ring accounts and then target people who use the same password for both accounts. And I gotta say, if you look at this article, it shows Mr. James Thomas Andrew McCarty, and this guy is the missing third character from Beavis and Butthead. He is holy shit, those ears. You got to look at this article just to check out this dude's ears.
You can own a cryptocurrency business.
Hey Tyler, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm deeply offended.
Well, I also just tweeted you the other one about the Roomba.
And that was a joke.
That guy is a straight up cousin of Beavis and Butthead. GPT, Dolly, and all the rest could not come up with a better third Beavis and Butthead character. That's fantastic.
Oh, there's an article in August.
Okay, so did anyone else have a tweet they thought we should dive into today before we dive into all the tweets that everybody sent in? Um, what do we got? Oh, this one from Katerina. This we left off with the drummer robot from yesterday, right? Anyone else with a tweet?
It's not tech related, but there's been some news from Japan. Basically, they've drastically increased their military budget, and also just recently, their central bank um, made a decision that might have some repercussions as well. It's
Okay.
yeah. So it's worth looking into it, but it's not tech related, so I'll keep it short.
Yeah, but how much in a military budget was on cyber operations? That's always a good thing to look at.
Okay. So PT Yoder found the Guardian article that says Elon Musk um, oh, PT Yoder says, I've heard this somewhere else before, that Twitter Blue subscribers will be able to vote in future polls on Twitter. And PT Yoder, being a regular tech newser, thought that sounded familiar, that he'd heard that before somewhere, like yesterday, here in Tech News Around the World. I'm assuming, because I remember somebody coming in here and telling us that. But Robbie found this one that Joby, the vertical takeoff and landing company, I believe that's the US based one, is now much closer to FAA certification for its air taxi. This is a vertical liftoff and landing air taxi. US company, Joby. I recall they're US. They're the US. There's a bunch of these companies. There's a dozen of them, but I believe Joby is the one that's kind of leading things, particularly from the US. So that's great if they're getting close to FAA certification. That means that we'll have air taxis before too long.
I think that's the one I see on United flights that are offering to get you from New York to Newark or JFK within 10 minutes.
You could do airport hopping with that thing.
We
Or yeah,
sh- we
go
sh-
from New York airports into the city very, very easily. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
Tokyo.
$100, which is the current cost for an Uber.
Are they electrically charged or ice?
Most, most are.
Good.
I don't
it,
know about Dutch.
this is probably a good time to point out that this is not good environmentally. Not that I'm a huge environmental nerd. I'm more about energy, but it's always going to take more energy to fly than it is to drive. Well, roughly the same, but these things are much less efficient. So these little planes, basically, the little planes, they're going to use a lot more energy. So it's going to be good for convenience, but not. Don't let anybody sell you on the green benefits. Let me put it that way. It's not fundamentally impossible to make something small, plane that can be more efficient than say a car, an EV. So from an
And just to
energy
put
point of
that
view.
into sorry to interrupt, Ben, but just to put it in perspective, the demand for coal or the consumption for coal has been the highest it's ever been in 2022.
So Valerie found one that McDonald's has a new apprenticeship program offering a new approach to building cyber talent pipeline for cybersecurity on the job training program for students so you can hack your Big Mac or something like that. Hashtag hack the Mac. McHack. Something. There's some branding opportunity there somewhere. Um, Jeff G found this one from the Taipei Times out of Taiwan. I'm retweeting it now. Taipei Times says a report calls on the United Kingdom not to accept the one China policy. That's kind of dicey. Taipei Times is a notable publication. BB is Taipei Times
Oh, yeah, yeah.
as
It's I believe it's for the foreigners living in Taiwan who can who do not read the Chinese that well. So it's yeah, I mean it's the up to date news in Taiwan.
a British parliamentary body yesterday in a policy recommendation report called on the UK to say that it only acknowledges but does not accept Beijing's one China principle. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how World War III starts.
Let's get ready to.
If the UK doesn't recognize Beijing's one China principle, that's as hard of a panda poke as you can come up with without outright claiming independence for Taiwan. Because you're essentially saying, no, Taiwan isn't part of China. That's effectively what you're saying. And that is the red line of all red lines for China.
But John is
The report was
with COVID these days. So
the,
not sure they were pay attention to this one, but yeah, that's a poke.
the
Yeah,
report was
Rishi
issued by the
Sunak,
British. Yeah.
he's been very vocal about China for a while, and so it's no surprise. And he was vocal about China before he was elected as well, so it's probably
Mm.
strategic.
And he's of Indian background. Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Interesting. The report was issued by the British House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. The UK's integrated review, released in March last year, was described by then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson as the largest review of its kind since the Cold War. Parliamentary Commission by the British House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee said that the UK should only acknowledge, we acknowledge your one, we know that you have a one China policy, but we don't accept your one China policy. Meaning, we don't think Taiwan is part of China. And to say that out loud That is the tiny. You know those cartoons of tiny domino that has another bigger domino behind it and another bigger one behind it and another bigger one behind it. That's the big. That's the first little domino that leads to the other dominoes. That's crazy talk right there. That this is even going through UK. Yesterday reports build on last year's review. The report said China presents a growing challenge in the international order. Oh boy. And its posture is becoming increasingly aggressive, particularly against island countries and developing nations. It also discussed China's ambitions towards annexing Taiwan, which it said exacerbates the risk of a conflict in the Taiwan Strait. Here's the quote. The UK has always supported Taiwan's meaningful participation in international organizations, the ministry said. It has always shown concern about the maintenance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait and called for a peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences. And this is coming from Taipei Times. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that this is all as it claims to be. That's crazy. You have one of the biggest countries in the world, one of the most powerful countries in the world, floating the idea of telling China to go stick itself where the sun don't shine on its existential, most existential issue.
Tyler's point
I,
at times
I
is
think this
that
news will be more credible if it's on the BBC.
Yes,
I
it would.
think Taipei Times that means that Beijing must have seen it. That's a point as well.
They're equally likely to see it in the Taipei Times as in the BBC.
I mean, for China, yes, but for Western world, maybe, yeah, this won't be as visible as it is for China.
Okay, now TaiwanNews.com. Jeff sends this one in. Taiwan confirms to have missiles capable of striking Beijing. Oh shit! Oh snap! Maybe that's why we're. Oh,
Let's
now I
get
get it.
ready to
I get it now. So now that Taiwan is capable of striking Beijing with missiles, now we've got. Now the game has changed a little bit. There was a little slap fight going on. Someone pulls out a knife. So now the balance of power has changed a little bit, and now once Taiwan feels it can defend itself to some ability, or at least has, kind of like North Korea gets a little cocky whenever they feel like they've got a working missile prototype or whatever. Now maybe can give some confidence to some countries to start hinting at Taiwanese independence, which is exactly what the UK is doing, by the way, and poking the panda square in the keister. And wow, interesting. Interesting coincidence on these two.
Well, I mean, we're seeing a uptick in an Asian arms race that we really haven't seen, and I'm talking about a broader Asian arms race that we haven't seen in
Japan as well. Yeah,
probably a century, oh, just about a century or so. So, I mean, someone
we just
mentioned
read
Japan earlier, and now we got Taiwan.
yesterday.
That's huge.
One of the big headlines yesterday was Japan's. How big was that
It was a
defense funding bill?
couple
Yeah,
hundred billion. So they're saying 2% of their GDP, but when you have GDP of trillions, hundreds
Yeah,
of billions of dollars is pretty sizable.
Japan's one of the biggest GDPs on the planet. Yeah,
Exactly. And they were already highly effective anyway before.
To the UK point, I well, I mean, I'm not surprised that this has happened. To the extent that what happened in the consulate, thanks Carl for reminding me, is an important shift in UK rhetoric with
oh,
China.
hmm.
Yeah, because if you don't know, the context is basically that in Manchester earlier in the year, there was a scuffle, I guess you could say, like a bit of a altercation outside of the British consulate, sorry, the Chinese consulate in Manchester, Britain, where basically video footage ended up showing that the I forget the official name, but like the second in command of the entire thing, like an actual diplomat, was involved in in the altercation. Like they were there at the gate, like fighting and grabbing the people's clothes, and it was all like, so this wasn't just a sort of, some security guards getting a little bit too carried away. It was a proper like diplomatic incident. The Chinese have never really acknowledged it, and the British government were quick to sort of say this is an internal review matter. So I'm not surprised if at least Rishi Sunak as well, he gave a speech basically 2 weeks ago saying that China is the main threat now. So I think Britain is really beginning to change its position and be, I wouldn't say it's going as far as Lithuania yet. Lithuania's got an official presence of Taiwan in its capital now. But
Correct.
this is quite significant
Well,
shift in that. Yeah.
yeah, the Manchester. I saw the Manchester video kind of the day, hours after it happened. There was a protest going on outside the Chinese consulate in Manchester, and these protesters had signs, and it wasn't like a very big protest, but there was a protest. I don't remember what the issue they were protesting about, to be honest. But I think they were in solidarity with the COVID protests that were going on, or the lockdown protests that were going on in China. It might have been the
Yeah,
banking
yeah,
ones.
it's related to the COVID protest.
Right. So COVID protests started sweeping China in 30 plus cities around China. And there was a mini one broke out in Manchester in front of the Chinese consulate, right? Like in the video I saw, it appeared to be about 10 or a dozen people or what have you. So, by the way, China hates this kind of stuff. I know this because I've had my dealings with the Chinese consulate in Stockholm over my events when I had the organizer of the Hong Kong protests speak at my event in Stockholm. And the Chinese ambassador to Sweden had a conniption and tried to get me canceled and threatened all of my sponsors with never being able to do business in China again and yada, yada, yada. And so they take these kinds of things very, very seriously, is my point. And so as Peter said, one of the consulate team members, a high-ranking diplomat, there's a gate. Embassies have gates.
So he was the consul general, so he was in charge of the entire
Consul
consulate.
general. There you go. That's it. So you have embassies very often have gates, unless you're like a Swedish embassy or some like very loved country. But most countries, like my God, American embassies are kind of shameful in how protected they need to be. They look like fortresses. Anyway, the Chinese consulate is kind of protected with a very notable gate, and this protesting was happening right at the gate. I mean, a meter from the gate, in front of the gate, the main gate. So the gate
Tyler, sorry,
opened.
sorry, I missed it. I missed the protest. Actually, it's this is happening in October. Is about the
Yeah,
20th National Congress.
right. Oh, it was going on during the Congress meeting. Okay, the anniversary thing. So the gate is open, right? So a car could drive through, as you would do if you're going in or out of the consulate in a car. You would need to open the gate. You could drive in out. The gate's open. And so the consulate general, according to Peter, and I have no reason to doubt him, grabs the protester and brings him on the other side of the threshold of where the gate would be if it were closed. You're now inside, technically, from some kind of legal standpoint. Consulates like this are sovereign territory. So technically, he's now on Chinese soil, this protester. And so the Chinese consulate team members in the video start beating him up, ostensibly drag him into the consulate. So that was, I think those people didn't realize. I myself, if I was I would not have considered that necessarily. I wouldn't have been keeping that in my mind. All they have to do is drag me 1 centimeter over into their side, and I'm on Chinese soil, and I could be disappeared. That's kind of a wild. So you could be Kasoji'd essentially. So
Can
Be
I just
careful
add
when
to
you're
this
protesting.
for a second? So there's a couple of other things that are quite important to take note of, which is basically that this was happening during a period where the UK basically didn't have a very functioning government. We had Liz Truss in power for less than 2 months, and then we had another leadership contest, and so there was no. I mean, the Foreign Office is obviously still working, but this is a bit of a grey area because you don't know who takes the lead on the investigations or who takes the lead on. Responding, the Home Office or the Foreign Office, because of how it happened across, arguably, as you say, state border, boundary or state boundaries. So there's a confliction of interests between the Foreign Office and the Home Office at this point. Equally, there's been shifts in the leadership of both, so there's no continuity, and that's why the investigations that have been ongoing are plagued by problems. They did request that the diplomatic officials waiver their right to immunity to question them, and that basically was rejected with six officials leaving Britain about 3 days ago, 4 or 5 days ago. So this is a problem because the UK's, as I say, got its own issue internally, which is inhibiting it from probably conducting and making sense of this. Is like James Cleverly, he's the Foreign Secretary. He said that it was he basically responded saying that the fact China pulled them out without even allowing them to have any engagement at all shows you how serious it is. And basically let me see here, I'm just reading an article. It likely to have included the men being declared persona non grata and expelled from the UK ideally, but China went ahead and did it first. So it's all about optics as well. China wants to be seen to be sort of protecting their staff from unnecessary aggressive UK political action. So I think for them to have come out and made this statement over Taiwan is the beginning of a slippery slope, but equally, diplomatic ping pong, and you could well see this deteriorate even more. But I just
Hey,
wanted to add
real
that context.
real quick on clashes like this. I got your word on China. Just remember, here in the U.S., not far from the White House, we had a Turkish president's detail of a sizable number of people stomp American citizens, literally kicked their asses, or what it was around 2017. And then about 2 years later, the charges were dropped on a majority of them. And then it's all videotaped. So I get the China thing, but this does happen a lot too. So China's not any unique, or not a lot. It does happen. And what's sad is the lack of backbone of some of our countries when this stuff happens to especially our citizens, the repercussions suck.
I would disagree too. I mean, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I would disagree. I think that this is quite serious because it's the general consul. So he's basically, as I say, like if you look at if you look at an embassy structure, so you've got the embassy itself or the ambassador, then you've got the Shah d'Affaires, which is just French for like second in command. He's in charge of the actual affairs. So if you close if you've ever seen Russia and America, for example, remove diplomatic or recall their ambassadors, that's usually symbolic, and it's if you actually shut down the entire embassy, that's serious. But recalling ambassadors is pretty common for large powers to do, just as a sort of like, well, screw you, two fingers up sort of thing. But because you've still got all the staff and the Shah affairs there, still the diplomatic functionality still exists. But but underneath that, you've got general people who run the entire consulate. So China and Britain, yes, obviously Britain's not a major power like China at the moment, but it's still a nuclear power, still a major component to NATO and on the Council of the UN. So it's got a lot of sway still diplomatically for the time being. And so to have a court on camera, physically, altercation between another member of the public and a really senior diplomatic official, which then crosses two borders of states which don't exactly have great relations as it is quite significant. And the fact that Britain has now responded by, well, conducting these inquiries and trying to find ways to, well, if they can't prosecute or at least process the people in question, the six diplomats that have obviously been pulled out for, well, because China knows that it wasn't great. That then they're going to find ways to apply the pressure and try and embarrass or ridicule China publicly on the international stage, and insinuating the acknowledgement of Taiwan's existence, a bit like the US does with its policy, is a way that they can do that. So I don't know.
So, no, I wasn't downplaying what you were saying. I was just giving another example. And then as we talk about this and just giving perspective of history, don't forget in the late 90s during the Clinton administration, there was an accidental bombing of a Chinese embassy that pretty much destroyed it in Belgrade. So
That's a
stuff
fair point.
happens.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. I'm just leveling the field. Things happen, and then there's things that we see and things that we don't see. But just remember the various history.
Piotr, how can you share more of your thoughts with regards to how, for decades now, the U.S. stood alone in terms of, in the one China policy, but being very vague about it, right? This is significant on a decades level type of context that the UK, another, you know, junior superpower, or how you want to frame that, is actually on the side of Taiwan. I mean, that's some of the biggest geopolitical news since Putin ran into Ukraine, right?
Well, yeah, I
There's
mean,
been
a lot's happened this year that has indirectly influenced and will be influencing for a long time to come rhetoric and feelings around Taiwan, right? Lithuania's establishment of the this office, little Lithuania suddenly receiving the almighty wrath of the Chinese Communist Party. Like, what the hell has China got to feel embarrassed or threatened by Lithuania? Clearly quite a lot because of the disproportionate response. Remember, it's not necessarily the action, it's the reaction that you need to pay attention to. And I think that Britain's an interesting one because, for example, in 2015 they joined the Asian AAIB or AIIB, whatever, which is China's basically equivalent World Bank, and the British joined it much at the anger and annoyance of the Americans in 2015. And that was of many major nations in the world, the UK is seen as the puppy dog to the US more than, let's be honest. So for them to just go out on a whim and be like, well, actually we're going to be self-interested and strategical and just join China and stuff, was significant. But then we've had the AUKUS deal. Britain is trying to find its place in the world as global Britain, and obviously the pivot to Asia amongst the Americans and many other people. That's why you've got half the British fleet, or at least a significant proportion, in the South China Sea. Like, we've got two other aircraft carrier down there. That's quite notable. So clearly the English or British are wary of that. And they've always tried to maintain, this is the important difference between military and diplomacy. If you have diplomacy, you can say everything and look great and keep the peace, but then your military sort of just floating around, just observing, just monitoring the situation on the cross strait. But if they begin to shift the narrative diplomatically as well, that is significant, and I think that this will be a welcomed, perhaps, position by the Americans. Biden has been a couple of times in the past year making mentions of Taiwan, and America's beginning to maybe come support Taiwan, and then the State Department pull that back, and the White House pull that back. So if Britain's beginning to do it, then it's I mean, maybe it's going to be interesting to see how the Chinese respond, because I don't think they're going to want to escalate this even more if they begin to cut ties with Britain even more, if they begin to make threats as well to the UK in certain ways. It's going to get hairy.
The
So
the strategic framing, though, too, is that certainly the diplomats for decades literally have been having these conversations. They just haven't been public. That's why this is so different. But if we see other countries, big, more UK rather than Lithuania size scale countries over the next few weeks or months, take this little window of opportunity to throw themselves in, to start to claim a side, even if it's just a little comment or something like that. There is a window here that would reflect more of a public disclosure that there are other defenders of Taiwan. I guess you could possibly frame it that way. And then the other leg on this stool is, as I understand it, or as I understand it, as we can see leaks on Twitter, this COVID is just wreaking massive havoc. So the social, there's one thing about social unrest with Xi Jinping, CCP, with the hand, the strong hand on the economy, but it looks like he just took his hand completely off, and there's literally people just the bodies are stacking up, and there's going to be a social cost to that as well, for sure, domestically for China, and that's going to have an influence domestically with regards to Xi's.
Yeah, I would add just a couple of other things that make this timing quite important, and then I'll pass back to Tyler, which is that basically, we've had the Chinese Communist Party summit. President Xi was re-elected or whatever, re-anointed for life, and we've also had the Chinese protests, and we've had Ukraine, and all this is, great chess pieces moving around, but some of those chess pieces are very unfavorable to China, and none of these. I'm not saying all this is connected, but the coincidental developments in Britain over the Chinese consulate. Uh, would normally perhaps you'd see the British maybe towing a very sort of diplomatically neutral line, saying, we condemn or we criticize, but that's about as far as it goes, and sort of people move on with their lives. This time, I get the sense that that may not necessarily just be the case, and maybe that's because the British, can tell that the Chinese are in a little bit more of a frail or sensitive situation than they may otherwise be, and so they're like, well, let's crank up the diplomatic pressure a little bit. Let's see how we can squeeze the Communist Party just a little bit, and maybe we can deepen those cracks. But that being said, this is a primarily internal British Chinese development. So I don't know whether you're going to suddenly see the French or the Germans or other people following in sort of saying we recognise Taiwan X, Y, and Z as the commission or whoever it was Tyler was referencing earlier has said. Because I don't see why you need to. I don't see why other countries would. I don't see why Macron would need to risk that sort of French Chinese relationship, which isn't ideal, but it doesn't need to be worse off than what's happening between Britain and China now. So I'm not surprised, and I think that Britain's very closely a strategical alignment with the US kind of plays into this as well. But anyway, thanks for the question.
Least of all Germany.
And it's
Germany can't risk it. Germany is just similar to New Zealand. Just too much of the GDP is tied up in export
They
to China.
did. They cannot independent from China.
and this may not have been
Um,
mainstream for a long time, but people were paying attention, and people have been looking at resources and how they're used, mined, processed, and then manufactured and sold back to people. And anyone in charge of any economy around the world is paying attention for the people that live in their country. So it may not have been in the mainstream for a long time, but these like David said, these conversations have been happening, and there have been articles to look for. They just haven't been in the mainstream, so they haven't been in the common folks, I guess, view of sight.
okay. So May found one that Visa, this is probably the biggest story in crypto land today. Visa teases Ethereum collaboration, aims to actively contribute to crypto development. The payment company Visa released a paper Monday investigating the potential for crypto auto payments. So using Ethereum in the same way it uses dollars for settling payments.
Ben, are they already using? I'm sorry, are they already
Which is
using
ironic.
Bitcoin? Is this a little bit of a backhand to Bitcoin, or I mean, why would they denounce just Ethereum?
Sorry, I'm away from the mic. I don't
Paper
think there
sparked
are. No, I don't think there's a Visa collab with Bitcoin, although I'm not entirely sure. Does anybody else know?
the paper sparked an internal company. Well, here's the difference. I think fundamentally, Bitcoin would have they couldn't do it with Bitcoin directly necessarily. There would need to be some kind of provider of some kind of service for Visa to tap into. Where with Ethereum, that is, can they do a partnership with
Yeah,
Ethereum directly?
well,
Because architecturally, that this is where Ethereum and
it
Bitcoin
would
have a
cost a lot of
difference.
gas fees to somebody, although they could aggregate that and spread it out. But of course, what you with
True.
Ethereum, this is to be clear. But what they could easily do with Bitcoin is collaborate via Lightning. So and then it's very close to free. You know, one basis point for a typical transaction, one hundredth of a percent. So yeah, that could be done, but I don't really know what that. Again, we'd want Nicholas here to tell us what the real
It says,
motivations and scamming behind the scenes is. Yeah.
yeah, someone ping. Let's if everyone pings Nicholas at the same time, or we could do the Beetlejuice thing and
I
also
will
we could say his
send
But
name
him
three
a back
times.
channel on WhatsApp.
The
I'm just thinking at the time. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tyler. Sorry.
the just reading the article a bit. The paper sparked internal company hackathon held earlier this year details how Ethereum users could, with support from Visa, schedule auto payments sent from self-custodial crypto wallets. Such capability is not yet possible on Ethereum mainnet. So this is without Lightning. I think that's what they mean by when they say Ethereum mainnet. Is that kind of synonymous with level one
Yes. Yeah, but
level
base level
access?
network. Yeah, where you have to pay full
But
fees. That you've got the maximum transaction rate that network can support, and so forth.
right, right. It says, but would be enabled by popular Ethereum proposal called account abstraction, which would allow Ethereum users accounts to function like smart contracts and feature pre-scheduled execution functions. So it almost sounds like Visa wants to be the Lightning, a Lightning-like layer for Ethereum. If I read that right, adding additional kind of settlement functionality, which if I was Visa, I would pursue potentially. Like why is Lightning and Visa not
It's
doing
just
that for
that time to
Bitcoin,
remind ourselves that the
for example?
purpose of all of these systems, the initial premise on which all the value propositions are built, is one of decentralization, and this is not moving in that direction. And the moment you are centralized with any of these
Right.
things, you have no advantage over a simple, streamlined, low carbon, low energy, high speed, cheap, reliable, auditable, centralized database that many companies have been using for many years to do many things. So you just pull the rug out of the, without using wanting to create a pun, but you pull the rug under the whole proposition when you start to centralize something that only started to make sense in the first place on the premise. And then these things always start with the premise of decentralization. And when you then build in a very centralized way like this, then you are the question of why would we even start to do it this way? Why would we use this huge, slow, energy intensive, lumbering database that's still effectively controlled by a small group? Why would we do that when we could just use what's already out there, be fast, efficient, auditable, trustworthy, and so forth? And you can't really answer that question. What you'll find that people then do is they go on to quickly talk about other things and try and wash over that fact with some, techno babble, because there is no good answer to that. So
Nicholas is
anyway,
here.
just some thoughts.
Nicholas is
Okay.
here.
Hey, Nicholas. Thank you, Cheryl. Nicholas, welcome back. Why we're reading the headline about Visa teasing Ethereum collaboration, aiming to actively contribute to crypto development. The payment company released a paper Monday exploring the potential for crypto auto payments via with Ethereum.
Yep. So the problem that the blockchain has is that it cannot do recurring payments. So if you have a subscription model, whatever the subscription model is,